Hey guys, I want to do part 3 of, I guess, overcoming art block, or maybe it's not art block, you just want to do something different. So, this is going to be about color. And if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I love color. I have all the colors, or at least a large chunk of colors, and I love all of them. Well, with a few exceptions, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I don't like mixing particularly, but if you do, that's awesome. You can mix, you can mix a new color and use that. That is not my thing. And again, that's okay. But there are some options. And some of these are kind of, I guess, different sides of the color wheel, for lack of a better idea. So you can always do something like choose 3 colors, and you can choose 3 colors blindly. You can choose 3 colors that don't normally go together. You can choose just colors that you have that maybe you don't normally use but you like. One that comes to mind for me is the ultramarine ash from Winsor Newton. I bought it. I thought, oh, this would make a good stone / mountain type color. And then I think I played with it just a little bit, and then it kind of went away. And in my defense, there was a lot going on. And so the other day I actually pulled it out and put some in a palette so that it was handy. That's a big thing for me. I'm more apt to use it if it's handy. And then started using it in a couple of projects. You can also use colors, challenge yourself to use colors that you don't like. I'm looking at you, Opera Pink. You guys knew I was going to say it. So I'm just not a big fan of neon colors, period. But Opera Pink is in particular one I just really, really don't like. Pick colors, or, pick 2 colors you like and a color you really don't like that you just want to use up, or you would normally get rid of. Or pick 2 colors, pick 4 colors, whatever. You can go to, I have a palette here with just 3 colors. Challenge yourself to mix something. Sometimes I think just challenging yourself and getting yourself out of just the mindset you've been in helps. You don't have to stick with your same colors. I know for most of us, we have colors that we probably find comforting, or that we just fall back on. I can tell you which blues I tend to fall back on a lot, that kind of thing. If you have colors you normally use, tell yourself, I can't use any of these. Now I have to use something else, and see if you can create something else that you really like with colors that you might not normally go for. You can also use like a limited palette if you're like me and you normally just kind of use everything, I guess. Then, use a limited palette. I keep palettes like this around a good bit. I do a lot of mixing, or these are colors that I don't have necessarily little pans of, mostly because I ran out of pans. I guess I should order some more. And I'll put them in here, or sometimes I'll open a paint and it kind of overflows and you can't really get it back in the tube. It'll go in something like this, or, one of these palettes or something like that. And, do something that you just use up what you already have in your palettes. I am not somebody that likes my stuff all blending together. To me, that just creates muddy colors. So I do keep mine fairly separate as a general rule. So I like my palettes to be cleaned off every so often. If you're like me, clean that palette off, use everything, clean it off and start over. That's something that you can do. I do some of the relax your brain stuff with a lot of these things where, I've got all these colors. Like, I don't use yellow ochre a whole lot. And I think this one kind of overflowed when I opened the tube, and that's how I ended up with some in there. But, having it there and making it into something else that I might not normally use. Like I said, I use it a lot in the relax your brain type of exercises that I talked about before. And that's a way that I tend to clean off my palettes. It helps, and it makes it so that you've got sections that are always clean and available for you, I guess is my biggest thing. If you make your own palettes and you have ones or one that you always fall back on, try creating some different ones. You guys saw last time where I was creating new palettes. I have an M-Gram palette, my Mayberry Blue, my Sennelier, and when I did these, and I was kind of filling in some colors when I bought these paints, I tried to make sure that I wasn't getting the exact same colors all the time. Yes, there are some colors I fall back on. Prussian blue is pretty much in every palette because I love Prussian blue, but instead of having a Payne's Gray, I believe, in my Sennelier palette, I had to figure out how to mix that one because Payne's Gray is something that I fall back on a lot. Instead of having a yellow-based red in this palette right now, I've got Dragon's Blood, and I want to use that as my warmer red. Those kinds of things. You know, if you've got like a sap green, this sap green is different than other sap greens. Swap out your sap greens if you've got them, that kind of thing, just so that you've got different options. I usually do lean towards having solid secondary colors, I guess. Like I want a solid green that I can tweak. I want an actual purple that I can tweak, those kinds of things. I also have found that I do like having some pink. Not necessarily magenta, but an actual pink. I do tend to use those more than I actually thought I would. So just mix it up. You know, you don't have to stick with the same colors. This palette doesn't stay shut. You don't have to always use the same thing. You can try something else. And I think I guess I should say, very set in my ways. You know, this is a much more limited palette compared to what I usually have. I usually like at least 24 colors, and this one clearly does not have that. So, you know, I've got this purple that's not as purpley as some of the others that I have, that kind of thing. So, you know, mix it up. Try to use something else. Trying to think. It may be my M-Gram palette that I chose. Like phthalo blue is a go-to. Most palettes have phthalo blue, and I ended up choosing, I think, manganese blue, which is also a phthalo blue, and I didn't realize it at the time. It is a little different, but you know, I tried to choose different ones. I don't have this forest green in any other palette, and I love this color. This greenish umber, again, I don't have in any other palette. I have a whole lot of Payne's Grays, but just mix up a palette. You know, use a different one. Use one that you haven't maybe used in a while, or use one that you're scared of using. You know, if you've got palettes that you keep saving for the right time, or, you know, you're telling yourself, oh, I got to wait until I've got the perfect project for this. Don't wait. Just use it. You know, the only bad art supply is the one you don't use. So make sure you're using those things. Don't save them for the perfect project, because the perfect project's never going to come along if you have that scarcity mindset. And I'm really bad about that mindset as well. And I really have to think about it sometimes, about pushing myself to use some of the supplies that I'm not scared to use, but I don't want to use up, I think, is the big thing. The other thing that you can do that you have seen me do are the monochrome paintings. You know, this is all one shade. This happens to be indigo. So this is just playing with the saturations and the amount of water and that kind of thing to create scenes. I love monochrome paintings. I think they are amazing. I have seen so many that are just so good and so inspiring, and I love to see the monochrome paintings, and that's part of the reason that I actually decided to do some. You know, here I picked, I think it's 3 or 4 colors. I'm looking, it may be a couple more, but you know, it was a relax your brain, but I just did this and picked colors that went together. You know, I didn't have a plan. I didn't anything like that, but you know, choosing the colors that you want to do and to flow together. Also, you could do a project like this This is from the night sky, the Do You Want to Paint a Night Sky project, where I did a bunch of these in different colors. It's the same basic setup, the same basic shapes, etc. And I wanted to see which night sky would be the one that I liked the most. It ended up, of course, being the Prussian blue, which is what I always fall back on. But I was really surprised by the indigo, for instance, because it made a really pretty night sky. I think I must have already sent it. The Payne's gray was the same. I was really surprised at how much I liked the Payne's gray. And then you also got to see, yeah, this is lunar violet, the granulation and the changes that it makes. You know, painting the same scene like this with a control, and then you just change the one thing, in this case, the night sky color, can really be fun and produce some different things. I also did it in a sketchbook with sepia. You know, everything else is the same. I just changed the background colors. I'm trying to think. I think this is all just sepia, but you know, everything else, all the mountains, for instance, are neutral tint. So you can use those things to create different things and to push yourself maybe past your norms or past the block that you're having, or you just want to do something a little different. You know, you want to relax your brain. You want to just not think about it. You don't want something that has to be spectacular or whatever to kind of push you along and help you grow. So you can always just mix it up. You don't have to do anything. You know, most of us have a color wheel. I have several of them. I have a CMYK and a regular color wheel. Close your eyes, turn it around, and pick 3 colors. And then write them down, and then go to your stash, and those are the colors you're going to use. Or tell yourself you're only using colors in this range, or you're only using them in this range, those kinds of things. And go through and see what you can come up with. You know, play with color. Color should be fun to me. Color, you know, shouldn't be serious. Color should just be something that you can use and play with and have fun with. You know, as much as I actually don't really care for mixing, I do like sometimes to sit down and just see what colors I can come up with. And I've had a few that I actually really like, that I have written down, thankfully, so that I can play with them again when the you know, the urge suits me. I want to say one of them is indigo and rose madder, maybe, and it produced a really deep, almost, I think I called it twilight, just a nice twilight color. I would actually like to see that in one of those night sky paintings and see what happens. But, you know, just play with color. Color's supposed to be fun. It should be fun. I mean, remember when you were a kid and you hit the coloring book and it was all about just putting the color down? Embrace that kid again. You know, go through and figure out how you like to play with color. You know, if you've got these little color charts and you want to, again, close your eyes and just pick some, then do it. You know, don't stress yourself out with colors. I usually don't ever have a problem picking colors. There are also some tools out there, you know, the color cubes. There's the Pantone things, stuff like that, where you can use one of those and help choose colors for you. You know, just choose something out of your norm. I think that's the big thing, to kind of jump start something and remember that you're not stuck with those colors. You know, just because you use the same, 12 colors or whatever that you normally use, there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot more you can make out there. There's a lot more that you may have in stash out there that you've even forgotten about. I've done that where, this King's Royal Blue, for instance, I bought it because I thought it would be a good sky color, and I haven't really used it much, which I've used it a little more now. But that's a color that I'm like, oh yeah, I bought this because it was going to be a really nice sky color. And then I sort of forgot about it in the midst of my, multitude of colors. And when I found it again, I was like, oh yeah, I want to use that. So if you have any of those, start pulling those out. Go through your stash and see what you have that you haven't used. Just open up your mind to playing with color. I think that's a huge thing. You know, if you like painting flowers and you pick colors that flowers don't normally come in that color, who cares? Just paint them, make yourself happy. You know, use it as a jumping point. Maybe they are flowers that live on another planet, or, you know, in a fairy tale or whatever. Don't lock yourself into a norm. You know, let your brain free flow if you need to, but embrace the color, embrace all the colors, even opera pink. I hate saying that. And go out there and go paint, go art, go have fun, guys. I'll see you next time.